Hi, everybody. Emily Best here. I'm the founder and CEO of Seed&Spark, and I am so excited about today's session. I don't even know where to begin. But where I am going to begin is acknowledging that I am coming to you from the occupied and sometimes unceded territories of the Wapentshire and Lenape tribes. Acknowledging that certainly if you're in North America, you're on land that didn't belong to you when it started, by and large. And it's important to acknowledge the ancestors who cared for this land long before us, and to familiarize yourselves with the practices they use so that this land sustains all of us for a long time to come. COVID has disproportionately affected Native tribes across the country, and you can donate to the relief fund in the chat comments that are there. Today's session is
Hi, everyone. I hope you could hear me. I'm sorry that we lost Emily. I'm very excited to join you. And for my tech people, if I'm all good, please just send me a thumbs up. So I'm Favianna. I am joining you from Ohlone territory, also known as the Bay Area in California. I am an artist and an activist, and working especially hard on this election to help activate our artistic power. I run an organization, the Center for Cultural Power, and we focus on issues from everything from racial justice to gender justice to climate justice. And our mission is really to activate artists so that we can support social change. And in today's presentation, I'm going to be talking about how we as artists create social change and what are some key things that we need to be thinking about as we engage in this election, which is only 27 days away. So the time is now, and I'm excited to join you. So first, let's talk about the concept of cultural power. When I was being mentored in my youth here in the Bay Area, the Bay Area, Oakland, where I live, is the home of the Black Panther Party. We are the home of the free speech movement. There's been so much activism that has emerged from here. And when I was young and was walking out my high school for ethnic studies and against prisons, I learned about people power. I learned about what could be achieved when people came together. I also learned about money power. I learned that sometimes institutions or individuals with a lot of money can, in fact, shape our world. I learned about earth power, of course, still learning about that every day, living in earthquake country and in wildfire country. And as I really delved into my power as a creator, I realized that there's another power, which is the power of culture. And why it is that we're powerful is because we have the capacity to transform the imagination. We are able to tell stories. And what we know, what neuroscience teaches us, is that human beings are very moved through their emotions more than they are through their rational thinking. As human beings on this planet, we have been telling each other stories since the beginning of time, whether it's writing it on the caves or speaking it around the fire. Stories are what myths are made out of, and myths shape policies and they shape our economic system. I love to think of culture like a wave, which is, it surrounds us all the time. Excuse me, culture is like the ocean that surrounds us all the time. And just like the ocean, we help shape it and it shapes us. When we are in a body of water, we are helping to create a shift, and culture is just like that. Sometimes just throwing one little rock into the water can have immense ripples. And so in the realm of culture making, stories are very powerful. One story can make a tremendous impact. One action, one kind of act of disruption could have an impact. And an example of that is our friend Colin Kaepernick here from the Bay Area, who 4 years ago took a knee. And when we look at how he was able to disrupt a very powerful entertainment industry, the NFL, and how today taking a knee is normalized behavior for athletes. That's the kind of shift that we think about. We think about the power of stories and how the visibility of stories has altered our landscape. I was alive in 1992 when I first saw the Rodney King beatings on video. And it wasn't until the brutal killing of Oscar Grant, which happened here in my neighborhood, that I realized how people were using their phones to tell a different kind of story, right? And how Oscar Grant's story made it possible to hear many other stories. So we, as artists, we shape culture. We're able to show people a way forward. We're able, in times of darkness, we're able to present a light. We're able to guide people. And what we do is very powerful. The reason it's powerful is because we work in the realm of ideas. And often when we are thinking about social justice, it may seem like a law defines a social justice win. However, a law or a policy change is actually the final manifestation of an idea whose time has come. But in the realm of culture, we create those ideas. And I'll give you an example. In 1997, Ellen DeGeneres was the first queer woman to come out on television. And if you recall, well, those of you who were alive and who were watching television back then, Ellen, all she did was like peck her girlfriend. And it was on the cover of Time magazine, Ellen DeGeneres saying, "I'm gay." And this was 1997. So a few years later, you had the Defense of Marriage Act, right? But what was happening on television is that you then had Will and Grace, Queer Eye, for the straight guy. You had then the L Word, and which actually was showing us much more like sexier and explicit depictions of queer love. So how did we move from Ellen to the L Word to then Orange is the New Black to seeing the first Black trans woman on a highly successful show? That was culture moving. One story made it possible for other stories to emerge. Now, I know what we were seeing was very white, but nevertheless, it actually helped change public opinion in the United States. And so from 1997 to about 2010, you just had the proliferation of queer stories in theater, in sports, right? You had athletes coming out. And by the time the Supreme Court already made same-sex marriage legal, people already were down with the idea in this country. There had already been a public shift. And so culture in that case helped shape politics and help impact what was going to happen. And that's unfortunately the world we live in. And it's largely because in the world of politics, we have a unbalanced power structure. We have the dominating voices of predominantly white men who are of a particular age group that simply are not in touch with many Americans, right? And so in the realm of culture, we have to know that we're always moving ahead faster than politics. It's usually about a 10-year lag. Another great example of that is the gun debate. Right. So when we're talking about guns in this country and how public opinion has shifted, there's a key example, and that is in 2012 when the Sandy Hook shooting took place and 20 children lost their lives. There was a moment when public opinion was in favor of gun reform. Now, did we have action in the political sector? No. Congress actually blocked legislation because of pressure from the NRA. In the economic sector, the gun manufacturers, the Walmarts, the gun sellers could have done something, but they didn't do anything. If we fast forward to 2018, Valentine's Day, when in Florida, in Parkland, Florida, at Marjorie Stoneman High School, when young people, after experiencing a gun massacre in their school, immediately took control of their narrative, right? Young people like Emma Gonzalez and David Hodge, who really ensured that not only were they telling their stories, but that also they were calling out the political establishment, right? If you recall, they were saying things like, "We call BS." So what happened? Within 2 weeks, Dick's Sporting Goods changed its policies and Walmart followed. And in less than a month, Florida changed its gun laws. And what does this tell us is that the potential of stories, but especially first-person stories, is very impactful. And that when people, in this case, these young people were actually trained in journalism, they were trained in drama, they knew how to express themselves and how to own their narrative. And so culture allowed for there to be rapid movement in both spaces. And so our power lies in the ability to help magnify, amplify, or tell a different kind of story. And we can't be frustrated by the fact that politics and economics lags behind. And usually, again, politics lags way behind. Economics, because of their interest in profit, often will latch on to whatever culture shift is happening. So culture is powerful. Culture is the realm of ideas. For me, as an environmentalist, I grew up in a very dirty, polluted community in East Oakland. My community, people in my neighborhood live 10 years less than white people just 2 miles up in the hills because we get a disproportionate amount of emissions. And so I've always cared about environmental justice, but there's something that really helps illuminate the power of perspective. And that is, it really matters what we see. This image here, the first time we ever saw Earth in this way was in 1969. So this image is only 51 years old. And when we saw Earth in this way, there was something that happened to us, right? Because we knew Earth was round. We knew, we had some idea of what it was like. But when we saw this image from outer space, this actually created a huge, momentum around understanding that we share a common home. In 1970, you had the first Earth Day, 1 year later after this photo was taken. And in that first Earth Day, 1/10 of the population in this country marched for Earth Day, 1/10. And what followed was a lot of legislation, including the creation of the EPA, the Clean and Safe Water Drinking Act, Endangered Species. I mean, there's like dozens of laws that followed over the next few years. Sadly, a lot of those laws are getting undone today. But what was powerful about it is that there was a cultural practice, almost like a ritual, that helped people collectively participate in a new kind of story. And that's also the power of culture, is that we take people somewhere else. We can give them practices, rituals, new ways of understanding the world around them. Not to mention that a simple image, think about the power of the pink triangle, of the fist, right? Think about how these symbols in our pop culture really move us, because it really is about perspective, right? Perspective and how we see the world, also known as worldview. So currently, because really of racism and white supremacy, the entire cultural industry, and I'm talking about Hollywood, film, television, gaming, performance, dance, publishing, is overwhelmingly run by white men. Music, right? And so what we're listening to, what we're watching, what we're interacting with, even, driving down the street, is predominantly through the lens of white men, and white men with a lot of power. And so we only are seeing one perspective. And in reality, when you have a power imbalance because we're not talking about just a few white men in power. In these industries, usually it's about 90 to 96% of people in leadership are white men. So they get to define the taste, they get to define what's good, what's not good, but it's actually a distorted reality that we're seeing. And so it's very critical for us to present the perspectives of many other people, not just those who have power. And that's what all of you as filmmakers can do, as content creators, is you can show us another perspective. I like to think about stories as stars in the galaxy. When one story illuminates, it could inspire many more stories. And when more stories are illuminated, we can then see constellations. And when we see constellations, we identify patterns, right? Things are no longer obscured. Another example of this is Me Too. So sexual harassment and sexual abuse is not new. What has changed is the way we tell stories about this. And the stories that have emerged in the last even 2.5 years have significantly changed the way we talk about sexual assault and sexual harassment, right? So, when you have a few actors come out, starting with Rose McGowan and Ashley Judd, and then you have dozens of artists come out, right? That is the power of story, is that one story can illuminate or open the door for so many more. Now, in politics, have we had a change around Me Too? Not really. We have a man who was committed sexual assault in the Supreme Court. And however, so there wasn't political shift, and there still is not enough laws for survivors to have justice. However, the fact that Dr. Christine Blasey Ford was able to have a hearing in Congress is culture shift. That is a product of people telling their stories that has made it unacceptable, right? We are in a very different place than we were in the 80s. And so again, culture is moving, but politics is lagging behind. It doesn't mean we need to wait up for politics. It does mean we need to continue moving forward on how we talk about not just the pain around sexual harassment and abuse, but also the repair that is needed. So let's move into what's happening now and why we really need you to get engaged in this election. So first is that we are at the intersection of 4 major crises. Of course, the pandemic, but also we're at a time of racial reckoning and the understanding of the impacts that systemic racism has had historically and how it's playing out now. We are in the age of climate chaos, right? Here in California, I have to every day check to see what the smoke levels are to figure out if I can go outside. And then, of course, an economic crisis, right? Unprecedented numbers of people who are losing their jobs, while we have our political establishment unable to have relief for those who really need it. So we've never been at this moment as human beings. I mean, the pandemic by itself is considered the largest culture change moment for human beings, straight up. Like straight up, we have not changed. Our traditions and our ways of doing things have never changed as rapidly as what the pandemic created. And so while that presents a hardship it also presents an opportunity because all the old narratives are being revealed, right? So there's an old narrative that says, and Greta Thunberg, great job for her for calling it out. It's a fairy tale of endless consumption. There's the idea that we can just drill for the oil and it's endless and nature is just here for us to take. But that's not a true story. That is actually a fabricated story. And that story is destroying us. So we need another kind of story. And similarly with the pandemic, how is it that in the richest country in the world, we don't have enough resources to care for all of us, right? And so maybe in the past, people were really not thinking about the healthcare system, but now they are, right? Maybe in the past, people were not thinking about universal income, but now they are. And so we as artists, it's not only about, exposing or talking about what's wrong, it's also about presenting a vision for what's possible. And what's possible doesn't have to be politically feasible. Because again, we're not in the work of changing politics, we're in the work of changing ideas. And the more that we can present big ideas, bold ideas, the more we can move people. We have learned that from the kids, really the teenagers who are pushing forward a Green New Deal. There would be no Green New Deal if it wasn't for kids going to Congress and basically blocking any kind of, blocking with their bodies, business as usual. And so thinking bold is a very powerful strategy. And we as artists, we can do that. We can create another picture of the world we want. A way that I like to think about this is moving from action to ideas, right? Because I think a lot of times when we talk about social justice or social change, we think a lot about action, right? Like that we have to march, that we have to protest, that we have to fight and struggle. But you can't fight and struggle your whole life. We also need to be creating about our yes, right? We can't just be about our no. We also have to be about our yes. And as artists, we can do that. We can move along the spectrum of human emotions. We can be both appalled and we can also be excited about a future that is not yet here. And so for you as artists, I really encourage you to think about narratives and stories that you can create that are about the future world that we want, right? A world in which racism doesn't exist, a world in which the gender binary doesn't exist, where we're living in harmony with nature. What does that world look like? How does it feel? What is it like when everyone has the healthcare that they need? And that's when we can normalize those kinds of ideas, we will be closer for them to actually be manifested in politics, because normalizing it means that the old story is no longer going to hold up, right? This old story that is so much based on domination and on greed, really on greed. So what we've done, the gang over at Culture Surge, which I'm a part of, my organization, the Center for Cultural Power, is a part of Culture Surge. And we work with artists, storytellers, musicians, filmmakers, all kinds of creatives to think about the best strategies around telling stories. And we've created a brief, which you can check out. The link is there. And I'm going to walk you through the brief around what are the key things that you all need to know as, in our moment of now, but especially as we are just a few days out from the election. So first is that we've landed on 6 inspirational story threads that you can use in your work. Now, these are threads that we have tested and vetted with people, and that we have found to really make people feel like they want to participate in our civic engagement, in civic engagement overall. Number 1, together we have power, right? And especially at a time when so much of our culture is about individual personalities and individual gain, the idea of collective power is very, very important. Number two, there is abundance. A lot of our governments are moving towards austerity, but there's actually enough to go around, right? There's a lot of resources in this country. It's just that they're not equitably distributed. So how do we move away from scarcity towards abundance, recognizing that there is enough for all of us? Number three, we lead by caring about each other. And that is, the act of caring is really meaningful right now, because as we know, we are experiencing a very contagious virus, and caring for people means wearing masks. It means that we actually have healthcare infrastructure that allows us to care for people, healthcare, right? But not just that. I mean, the number of parents who are at home caring for their kids, it's so clear right now that we were living in a system in which the labor of mostly women was unpaid, unrecognized, invisible labor. And now it's suddenly crystal clear that we need a shift in how we care for our families, our elders, our children. Number four, we deserve joy. And this is very important because if you kind of take a look at how people feel after major happenings. So for example, last week after the debate, if you checked out on social media, people felt sick. There was a lot of tweets that expressed that people wanted to throw up, or they were overwhelmed, or they wanted a break, or they felt like they just witnessed a children fight, right? These things are actually, they impact our nervous system, right? When we are in a place of constant chaos and overwhelm, it shuts people down. And when you shut people down, they're not going to engage. They're not going to vote. They're going to be shut down. So the idea of deserving joy is very, very important, and self-care, because it is really a remedy to the harsh moments that we are in. Number five, we all belong. We all have value. Right? It means we don't leave people behind. We don't leave undocumented people behind, right? We care that undocumented workers have to work in smoky conditions. The last one is curiosity is the path to our best future. And this is about asking bold questions, similar to what I said before, right? Asking big questions like, is it the end of our dependence on oil, right? There's a lot of oil sitting out in tankers in the ocean right now because people are just not using oil. So maybe it's time to be bold about a clean energy future. Is it time for universal healthcare? Is it time for universal basic income? Is it time to really think about how we shop? What kind of economies do we support at a time when the wealth gap is extreme? So I'll show you here some of the things that I've created. This is the first piece I did, Together We Have Power. And I will admit here that I put the date 11/3/20, which is actually not a good thing to do. And I later corrected that. But it's not a good thing to do is because voting is not about a day anymore. Voting is about a season. And so I started modifying, how it is that I'd made my art. Here's another piece in which I use the second bullet, we lead by caring about each other. In this case, I did not put the date, but then I realized oh, you know what? Voting is really the most important thing to highlight. So how do I put that up front? I'm just going to zip on over to what I ended up doing. This is a piece I just did after we were experiencing massive wildfires. And what I learned is that it's not enough to say vote. We realized this in our research with Culture Surge. You actually have to tell people how to vote, right? Vote early, in person, by mail, Dropbox. These are all new behaviors that people are needing to do, right? And we know as artists, we need to model that behavior. So it's about, somebody holding a ballot, walking a ballot to the mailbox. These are the kinds of ways we need to think, because saying vote really doesn't say much anymore. And if we want to get people to turn out in mass, the more we can inform them, the better. So how do we move people to action? Here's what we want them to do. We want folks to vote early and vote safely, right? I mean, smoke here is so bad that one day it was like dark. I don't think people are going to be standing in line to vote when the smoke is so bad that we get an order to stay inside. So we do need to vote early. Voting early is critical. It is the way to prevent, also contagion. Contagion is a big issue and a big worry for people. How do people vote safely? The second one is making a voting plan. So, as I said before, it's not about a voting day anymore. It's about a voting season. So, just like you prepare for Halloween or for Valentine's Day, you have to make a plan, right? Maybe are you going to mail in your ballot? Are you going to drop it off at a drop box? In some states, some people are going to have a lot of barriers. They need to call in twice to see if they're, on the registration rolls. So it requires planning. It's not something you want to leave until the end. And number 3 is organizing friends and family to vote, especially in the states where voter turnout is very critical. And I've listed these states here, right? And these states are usually states in which major races has been determined. And so if you are in any of these states, we need your stories. We need the stories of your community. And we need folks to be encouraged to do these kinds of behaviors. This is a piece by the Indigenous artist Ben Brown. And one thing that we know about Indigenous communities is that their post office infrastructure is much less than what we have in the cities. So for rural communities, voting in person is something that they will need to be doing. And in many states, voting is starting early, in-person voting. For example, in California, in-person voting started today or yesterday, I think. I forgot what day it is. But, depicting and showing people wearing their masks, right? They're voting in a safe way. I've showed you this one. This piece by Voto Latino, it really shows us the urgency, right? Request your ballot right now. Like, just get your ballot right now. This is the kind of things we need to encourage people to do. Of course, here you have a mask. This person looks joyful, and the rising sun in the background really gives me the idea that we're embarking on a new day. So it's effective. In the creative brief, we have included calls to action so that you could use any of these. For example, if you look on the lower right, the section "Make Your Vote Plan," you could do something fun like mask up and vote. Phone, keys, wallet, mask, vote. Right? We've created a cool list of ways you can say it, and of course you can make up your own. But just here are some things, some tips. And I want to show you just what are some effective ways that my organization has commissioned artists, especially in the states that I showed you. And so I want to give you a little taste of that. I won't be able to show you the full video, but I do want to give you a taste. And I also want to just tell you, people are doing all kinds of stuff, right? Many of you may have seen the Atlanta strippers video with getting out the vote. Be creative. We need all the creativity right now. And the comedy, the raciness, all of it is what we need. So I'm gonna show you this video, and I'm gonna kind of zip through some of it, just because I'm not sure if I could show you the full 2 minutes, because I want to show you another one. But let's go ahead and try. Oh, shoot. Sorry. Sorry. Oh, sorry. Okay, I'm going to advance this. Here we go.
Request your mail and ballot early. Fill out the application early. Submit your election office early. That's how we're voting early. Early, yeah, we gotta vote early. Hey, try to call us early. Order these and translate them early. Hell yeah, we're voting early.
Great. So I will stop sharing now. But yeah, so I think it is really about exploring collaborations with other musicians. For us, it's very important to speak to voters of color, queer voters, trans voters, voters who are just kind of fed up with the system, because those are the folks who traditionally don't get spoken to. The other thing that we're learning is that DIY work is actually pretty effective, and that people want to hear from real voices. They want to hear from everyday people, because DIY means not overly produced, but also authentic voices. We know that celebrity voices are a little bit harder to engage with. And that, comedy, sexiness, things that sort of break the mold of traditional voting is key. I actually want to just show you one more, because we've also been working with micro influencers, and I found one example to be highly effective. And it's just, I'm going to show it to you. Okay, let's see here. Here we go. This is Ricky Thompson, who has a huge following. I mean, you could see here 1 million views. Let's go ahead and do this.
Listen up, because I have something to say. Everybody should go out and vote, okay? Hold up, let me repeat myself, because I don't think y'all heard me. Everyone should go out and vote. I am so sick and tired of living in such a hateful world. This place is ugly, and it's making me nauseous. I can't stand this anymore. So you know what? It is time for a change. No more, well, you know what? I'm just going to wait for it to play out. Fuck that, okay? It is time for a change. It is time for us to not be silent. It's time for us to stop holding our tongue. It is time for us to speak up and do something about it. So therefore, everybody should go vote, okay? And if you haven't registered to vote, get your ass up and do that. So when it's time, I want everyone to grab their boots, their coat, and their mask, and to hit the polls and go vote, okay? Enough is enough. Everybody go vote, okay? And that's on change, baby. Thank you. Listen up, because I have something to say.
Okay, so another thing just to remember, and we've been learning this just through our distribution strategies, and you probably all know this, but 1-minute videos, 59-second videos do very well, because they're shareable, they're highly shareable, versus, IGTV. Sometimes it's a little harder to share. You could usually only share IGTV stories on, IGTV videos can only be shared on stories, whereas videos like what you've seen by Ricky got massive shares because they fall within the 59-second section. So I encourage you all to also check out my organization's feed, Culture Strike, today on Instagram. Today we released a video with Las Cafeteras, which is a band, a Chicana band in LA. And, as I talk to you about these themes, joy, collective power, you're going to see it a lot in their video. You're going to see it in the music video of people dancing, partying, and sort of in victory, right? So showing us what a future can look like. So with that, let's go ahead and open it up to questions. Thank you so much.
Hi, Favianna. That was incredible. I actually shouted when you said we deserve joy.
Yeah.
I feel like that is one of those sort of underrated, incredibly important moments. And I just want to kick off with sort of an initial question, which is, how. So when you're at the intersection of art and activism, there are two wells of emotional energy you have to keep alive. And that sort of internal creative well, right? And then the external community organizing, engaged, active well. How do you personally find your balance between those two things?
Yes. So I really follow how the narratives, the public narratives, are playing out in our culture at large, and I also look at data, right? So for example, a lot of the ways in which the current political establishment right now really uses fear. I mean, let's even think about the border wall, right? Signs of division, metaphors of division. So as artists, I think we could really look at things and say like, okay, cool. What are the emotions that are most dominating right now? And I always like to think about, where do I land on the opposite spectrum right now? So even during Me Too, I realized that so much of what was dominating the media were stories about sexual abuse. And from my point of view, I realized we need stories about consent and what that looks like, because we're never going to move away from pain-oriented narratives unless we also have pleasure-oriented narratives.
Yes.
I really encourage you all to just make an assessment of what you're seeing and feeling. And really, it's even like a body scan of how you feel when you are engaging in pop culture, news, media, because I think that gives you an indication of where things need to go. And as I said, I do think that tapping into our joy and our power, and really around our yes, is really key, because we are living in the world of no right now. No is everything. And I also believe, Arundhati Roy talked about this so well, but that the pandemic is really a portal. It is a portal of worldview shifting. The world has to shift overall, period. And some countries are doing it better than others. But just like in any kind of shift, there will always be a moment of conflict. And as artists, I think we need to think beyond that. We have to think about, how are we starting to normalize ideas, right, around care, joy, belonging, because that's missing.
Yes.
And it's also missing at a time when the traditional places where we would go, entertain ourselves, like sports, people go to church, they go out, they're seen, they're dating, or they're going to the movies. Like that's all shut down, right? There's hardly any production happening. Sports is happening in a very different way. So people's consumption of culture is also changing. I mean, consumption of the internet is up. And so we are in a very, very unique opportunity where, as culture makers, it is really about y'all experimenting with land. And so as an artist, I'm very inspired by, knowing that the environment for how people will receive my ideas is really hot right now. And I honestly, I stay inspired by doing work around the themes that I care about, which is joy and power. So yeah.
I mean, I love this so much. There's something I'm moving around because in the pandemic, nothing is not exciting, and there are like people in the house doing inspection related things because we are currently nomads. I would say, just from my personal experience, I am a sexual assault survivor, but the work that I chose to make was called Fuck Yes, and they were digital shorts about sexual consent, which we did in collaboration with a group of women artists. And I really, what you said speaks to me so much, because I remember the moment in the conversation where we said the positive, the affirmative doesn't exist, right? Like our education around sex is all about what not to do and not about what to do. And that was what we were, really working towards. So I love this of like using your art to create balance. Like, why is this is a new idea to me in a way.
Yeah. Well, also, I mean, this is something we've been working on for a long time with artists and creators, which is why we wrote the guide. We wrote a guide so that you all don't have to think too hard. There's a lot of things in there which we've sort of aggregated, right? And they're not specific for a reason, because this is not about giving you, this is not a framing messaging doc. This is a big ideas doc. And so when you're thinking about even, a clean energy future, right? The only folks holding that narrative right now are kids, the young people who are, really, in a very performative way. The Sunrise Movement kids, how they dress in yellow, they make their big banners, they take photos of themselves. That is theater. And so imagine if we can, if that's what you care about, the Green New Deal, or you care about a shift to clean energy, how are you showing that through big and bold ideas, curiosity about the future? Imagine, right now as an environmentalist, I'm just like, wow, y'all, the oil industry is so weak right now. Like, it's really, really weak.
Right, when the iron is hot.
Yeah, no, you have to strike while the iron's hot. And imagine if we can do that in mass. So I think that the other thing just to reflect on is that as content creators, as artists, we have actually not really been organized. We are not an organized sector. And this election is an opportunity for us to get organized and to really just put out massive content. And I don't think it ends when the election is decided. Because first of all, I can assure you this is going to be a very hard election. I don't think it's going to end on November 3rd. But even then, our work is really beyond that, right? Because as I said before, the old ways of doing things are not working. They're not working for most people. They're definitely not working for Earth. We're seeing all the signs. And the new voices, and I don't want to call them new voices, but the voices that are most disruptive are also the ones who are having success with their storytelling, like the Squad, Ayanna Pressley, AOC. I mean, it's not a surprise that AOC is probably the politician with the most, one of the elected officials with the most follows and IG, posts. Yeah. So we are in that time right now as artists. And so I encourage you not just to make work, but get informed, try different things out, organize your peers. We're only going to be in this window for a certain amount of time.
So that leads to a question that Sarah McKinnon is asking in the comments that I think is really challenging right now, because I know I personally have a very ambivalent relationship to social media platforms, particularly the ones that have basically actively been used to destroy and disrupt democracy, equality. They have been used as attack vehicles. They have been used to organize the most fringe but most dangerous parts of our society. And so Sarah McKinnon asked, do you have suggestions for artists who aren't on any social media platforms? Or is this work possible without, AOC's following, without building influence in that way?
Yeah, so first, yes, social media is a tool. It's a tool around reaching audience. But your audience could also be an audience that is local. And the other thing that the pandemic is doing, it's actually really requiring us to think about how we gather and support each other at the local level, right? And so, even the stuff we've seen that has been really good of how neighbors are like howling at night or they're singing together. I really encourage you to think about how you can activate people in your neighborhood, in the school that you go, your kids are going to. Like, you can definitely think locally. And also is that, in my city, the whole downtown is boarded up. Like, it's shut down. It's boarded up. So the artists in my city are like, there's so many new murals because our downtown is boarded up. And so now there's been over 1,000 murals done in downtown Oakland. And so that's created an entirely new ecosystem that wasn't there before. And so think about how your art, Bree Newsom climbed a flagpole to take down the Confederate flag. So your disruption doesn't have to be done on social, but I do encourage to, at the very least, try to get somebody to capture it, to share it, so that it can move beyond your local activation. but also activation with your community and people is important.
I love that so much. And Natalie Crew has a set of interesting questions, which I'm going to try to summarize because I think her question, which is how do we move beyond the system and towards cultural organizing and building power that dismantles the system. So like, I really hear when folks, especially young folks, are like, isn't the system working exactly as it was designed? And why do I continue to participate in this system that continues to undermine and belittle me? And so I'm just curious how you talk about that in your work of using the systems that be, the social media channels to actually dismantle the systems of oppression.
I think the same thing applies. It's really about the yes. It's really about what you want to create. I'm a gardener. I'm a vegan, so I grow a lot of my own food in my garden. But this question comes up a lot because I work with a lot of people in Hollywood, and I'm not gonna do diversity and inclusion training for white-dominated companies. I rather invest my time in new initiatives that are pilot initiatives that can begin to build another kind of infrastructure. So I can't ignore what exists, right? We can't not engage with it, but we can put more emphasis on our yes than we do on our no. And just like we can't not engage with the no, right? There's a lot of awful things happening that I need to show up for. And I love how, Black Lives Matter is talking about this. Black Lives Matter offered us a vision around defunding the police, right? Defund the police. Why defund the police? Because our cities, number one, they don't have budgets, and we're investing in these like racist institutions that actually don't keep communities of color safe. So what does keep communities of color safe? Different ways of supporting crises, right? You maybe need social workers to respond to people with mental health outbreaks. So I think that it's the system. Yes, of course it's working the way it was designed to work, but then what are you building? What are you nourishing? What are you putting your energy into that is going to be lasting for whoever comes next, right? Like, what are you able to build, create that you can pass on, or that you can, really share? Because I do think it's about collective organizing. I think that as artists, I'm a visual artist who has never really desired to have gallery representation. And I've always built my own platform and my own online store and all of that so I could access my customers directly. And now, as the galleries are struggling, I have something I invested in for 10 years that is actually a model. And so I think always be about, investing in the things that the pilots, the small projects that can help build a foundation for the different kinds of systems that we need.
I love this so much. You're talking about investing in yourself. You're talking about investing in a positive vision of the future. You're talking about using art to create balance in society, alternative visions of society. I mean, these are articulations that look, I do this work all damn day, and like it's not the things that I'm hearing every day, and I feel like it's such a clear path for finding joy in your work.
Yeah.
Right. Which as an artist, if you can't find that joy, I mean, I've talked to a lot of artists recently who are like, I don't have the creative energy because they feel like they're battling on so many fronts.
Yeah.
And you're talking about really making a very focused investment.
Yeah. And I think it's also, what I've learned also from ecofeminism, it is around regenerative systems. When you go in and you hurt the earth and you dominate it and you put all kinds of crap in it and you disturb it, that's an extractive model. Our systems right now are extractive towards us.
Yes.
Our systems break us. They don't invest in us. They don't regenerate. But when you instead focus on regenerative systems, right? Which is, how am I creating something that is regenerative for my community, for my circle of artists, in which we are reinvesting in ourselves, right? We're building economies of support. I mean, I had to do this because since I was a teenager, I could never get into art school. Like, there was nobody who understood my art. I mean, throughout my entire adult life, I have faced so many artistic barriers. So as a result, I created my own path, and that's why I have, an organization today. And now I get to work with artists of all types and have built collective power. But it takes time and energy. And I do think it's about imagining regenerative, collaborative systems that are not about, just the individual, or that even, our sense of value shifts, right? Like systems of supportive care. All of those things in the pandemic are especially clear, right? And now I think it's just, treat it as a garden of how do you create a regenerative relationship to your work and to the community that holds your work.
What you had me thinking about was something that I am always struck by, which is that, and I would go ahead and say that in this category that I'm thinking of, it's entirely women of color who are building these systems for repair. And also, I mean, I think a really important part of the work is also like minimizing and mitigating the harm of the current systems while you are building towards those new systems, right? That always seems to be a part of the work. Because of course we have to operate inside these systems to some extent. Maybe I go to the damn grocery store, right? That's the system at work also. I always am struck by the personal power and fortitude that you hold. You're clearly like an extrovert. This is you found a lot of this internally for a long time, and I imagine that there are people out there who are introverts, or who like don't socially relate as well or as easily, or frankly, some people who like just don't want to, like, don't have the fight every single day,
right.
For their own set of reasons. And I wonder if you could speak a little bit to like, what are the steps that I don't know how to say this without that an average person can take, right? That are sort of that daily, that are part of that regenerative system.
Yeah, great. So first is, look, our social structures and our system, our economic system, capitalism, really forces us to engage in very destructive patterns. And so it really takes planning to work outside of that. And it shouldn't be a privilege. It should actually, and so what I learned through my training with Creative Capital back in 2004, which really helped me, is that I wrote a strategy plan, right? I thought about where I wanted to be in 5 years and 10 years. And I created a roadmap for myself, which helped me identify that in order to have a sort of way of operating in, outside of what is really forced upon us, I can make a different set of decisions. And where was I going to prioritize that, right? And where do I have control? I mean, I have control with what I eat. I ended up, making my house solar powered. I've tried to really learn how to do urban gardening so that I could have with my germ pod. Now we have ways of supporting each other. And then with my art, I realized that because of white supremacy, like I was never going to get an open door. I mean, this was like the early 2000s. And so I had to really think about, how am I going to tell my story? How am I going to reach my people? What do I need to do that? I need a website. I need to figure out how to have my social media platforms. I need to get public speaking training. So I think it's about thinking big about where you want to go and then mapping something out. Because, I mean, I love Octavia Butler, how she wrote her goals. And I do think that in a world in which we're reduced to like these really commodities that are going to work in service of capitalism, you have to have, you got to actually have intentionality to if you want that to not be the case, in which case you need to have another kind of plan. And so I encourage people just to think about, is to, really imagine what that looks like for you in 5 years and 10 years, and then kind of work backwards from that. And that includes, what are your systems of care? What are your systems of support? What are your systems of survival in a way where, you don't have to surrender to an exploitative system, right? And so I would say, yeah, make a plan, like set some goals. I feel like I grew up in an immigrant family too, and so I just feel like these were kind of survival strategies. But I do think that it is now what is needed, because we're in the midst of a transition. This is probably going to be about a 10-year transition, to be honest.
I appreciate that optimism. I have been in my mind thinking about it as a generation. So I've been thinking about, what do I need? I have very little kids, and I'm like, all right, by the time they're 25, we will have remade these systems, and how am I going to make them? I named my daughter a name that means warrior, because I got pregnant the same week that the family border separation started, and I started speaking to this person in my belly saying, you're going to have to be a warrior for the people who are broken by the actions of this administration. And how do we build that into our system? So I think you're also talking about cultivating your artistry as a child, right? Like you don't think about like, I'm going to do this, and then when it's done, I like kick it out of the house. Like, this is a lifelong endeavor, right? That you have plans and strategies for. Favianna, you have been so amazing, remarkable, sparkly, fantastic. It's been a delight just to get to visit your plants as well, and your art in the background. Where can people find you, that you would like them to find you, and what would you like them to do next?
Yes, so you could find me on social media, Favianna1 with the number 1. There I am, on Instagram, and then my website is very easy, favianna.com. I would say the best thing you can do is like buy my art. I have everything from $20 to $5,000. So if you go to if you go to Favianna1, there's a link on my links to my online shop, and just follow me. And I do a lot of talks like this, so you could see me more often.
Thank you so much. Thank you to all of our attendees, and we look forward to seeing you again soon.
All right, bye-bye.